What's going on, beautiful people? Today we have a special guest, David Lancashire, co-founder of Saito. Pretty much, Saito is an open network that allows users to run blockchain apps in browser without any third-party infrastructure, as well as a host of other things. And we're going to get into that today. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I think it's evening for me and morning for you. So
okay.
I'll try to be the energy, you know?
Okay. I apologize about the time difference. We were just talking about this before we started recording, but yeah, it's crazy how you have to do these Zoom calls and obviously match up the times and everything. But I'm glad that, you know, at least you're awake.
But well, we'll see how coherent we can be. But
don't worry, if one of us starts sleeping, we'll cut it off. So before we jump into Saito, though, I would like to ask, who are you as an individual? You know, in terms of professional background, if you'd like, and maybe like what you did before Saito. Like, who's David?
Okay, short version, Canadian, from Toronto, which is north of you, and like most Canadians, we flee to the United States as soon as we graduate from college. So I spent about 2.5 years in California, grad school at Berkeley. I was interested in tech and economics and political science and stuff. My interest was China. Went out to China and kind of fell into crypto there at around 2012, 2013. And it was a fascinating space because, I think in the West, people were like, Bitcoin is this really niche thing. But in China, there were entire communities that were really engaging with it because, like, you can't collect international payments if you're in China. And the banking system is so tightly controlled that people don't have investment options. And so, I remember people from like Bitcoin Core would come to these meetups in Beijing and they'd look around and you could tell that they were coming from a community where maybe they've got like a meetup of 6 or 7 people. And now there's this room with like 40 or 50 people here. So that's my background. That's what got me into crypto. And I think, like most people, when you get into this space, the more people you know and the more you get in, the more you start dealing with things on a more fundamental level. So Saito was really born out of the block size wars of 2014 to 2016. Back then, I think before the ICO boom in 2017 or so, you'd really actually get meaningful discussions because people wanted. Well, I mean, now it's like what token are invested in, right? And people are all pumping their bags. But back then, people would be talking about what should Bitcoin do, and then Ethereum would come along, and it's like, well, is this going to work? And the debates were really about the fundamentals, and that's kind of what Saito comes out from. And it's a view of blockchain where the fundamental problems are economic, not technical. And that we need to make changes to the incentive layer of the blockchain to fix these, but that we can do this. And so background, I mean, that's 2017, myself and my co-founder, Richard, when we figured out how to do Saito, we were kind of going back and forth over this. And I basically stopped what I was doing. I shut down my company because I said, well, we have to actually do this. Richard did the same thing, and it's been about 3 to 4 years of pushing since then. And we've gone from an idea to a tested idea to a test net to now a working network. And now that we're kind of big enough, people are starting to take an interest and pay more attention to how different we are and the critiques that we have of proof of work and proof of stake.
Oh yeah, and it's funny. I was, when I was making that video that you saw earlier, I was, doing my research, just on Saito in general on YouTube, and I was finding videos from like 2 years ago. I'm like, oh wow, like these guys have been around for a while. I mean,
you see the Inception one?
No, I don't. I did not see that one.
Okay, it's nice. We use it as like a mental model because Saito's like the incentive layer is the problem. The problem is, we're supposed to be this free market, but we're paying people to do stuff. So we shouldn't be surprised when they do what we're paying them to do. And if they have a way to manipulate the system to make money that we don't want, well, that's where our problem is. And so we use Inception as this analogy where it's like you have to go down to the deepest level. But when you fix things, it kind of causes these cascading solutions that
yes.
ripple up to the tech layer.
It's funny that's yeah, something you might find maybe throughout this interview actually is that I like kind of relating just how humans think and like a little bit of psychology to how blockchain works, and that's kind of the whole thing where it's like if you just fix the problem that you see in the surface, all you're doing is putting a band-aid on it. You're not fixing the actual wound, right? You got to go in, multiple layers in this case, right, and actually fix the core of the issue.
And that means you have to identify the issue. And I think going on psychologically, one of the big issues in blockchain is people have this really, it's like a naive libertarian approach where people believe that markets can't cause problems. And so when they run into a problem, like this is Vitalik Buterin, I had an exchange with him where we're talking about the Infura problem. And it's like, look, like Infura needs a business model. It's collecting transactions that have fees in them. It can make money with these transactions because it can stake and mine them itself, or it can sell them to people, right? Like it's not rocket science what's going to happen when the private sector gets its hands on money flowing through these networks. It like hub and spoke starts to control it. And he goes, but that would be suboptimal. And it's like, yeah, that's what a market failure is. A market failure is suboptimal. But people get that they've got this, but the job of the market is to solve all of my problems. And it's because people want the desired outcome of the free market that they're really reluctant often to look down and think critically about what's actually happening. Like, what really are you incentivizing? And so, yeah, I think there's some psychological resistance to what we're doing and what we're saying, but I think that is changing quickly.
No, it's good. Obviously, to me, I'm always a fan of, kind of branching out, seeing, like, and listen, I'll tell you up front, I'm a big fan of Ethereum. I think Vitalik's kind of funny, just his mannerisms, the way the guy acts. But I always implore the idea of being your own devil's advocate. Like I love Ethereum. What's wrong with it? You know what I mean? Is there something better than it, right? For example.
It's this technocratic USSR. We are the technocratic experts. We are you look at the ETH2 roadmap in The Economist, they've got a crew in Singapore. They wrote a review where they're like, we've got 100 hard-coded economic variables, more than 100. And it's like, well, maybe that's a problem. Why are you hard-coding economic variables?
Right.
And, and then it's like, well, how did you pick that figure? And it's like, well, and that basically boils down to how much money can we drag out of the consensus layer to do this congestion EIP 1559 policy, or what should we charge for rent? And, right now that's okay, but if you're a scalable blockchain at scale and you're competing with other blockchains and your economic policy is wrong and it's suboptimal, your pricing is way off. And who's going to use you? That being said, I've got to say I do like Vitalik and I do like the Ethereum people. I think they're very well intentioned. I think they do have these blinders on because they like to see things as technical problems for experts to optimize. Right. Which is, that's Gosplan in the Soviet Union. Let's get the experts to set freight rates for the entire country. Like, it's not going to work. But it's a nice pump in the meantime. So
there you go. Everyone likes a nice pump.
It makes people happy, right?
Hey, yeah, not wrong. So I guess maybe moving off a little bit of the Ethereum and Vitalik. We were speaking about this earlier, actually, but just so you can maybe kind of describe to the people, what mechanism do you guys use to reach consensus? We're talking about obviously Ethereum is moving to proof of stake, Bitcoin's proof of work. What are you guys essentially using?
Okay. Am I allowed to take 30, 40 seconds and kind of describe the problems with proof of work and proof of stake?
Well, whatever you want.
Let's give it a shot. If it's too much,
do whatever you want. Yeah, man, it's your time.
we're okay, because people got to see we can describe the solution, but if people don't see the problems, they're like, well, okay. And in economics in the 1960s, there's something called public choice theory that comes out of the work of guys like Mancure Olson. And people have heard of the tragedy of the commons, prisoner's dilemma. And what this is basically is economists start systematically noticing that there's activities sometimes that benefit all of us. right? Like if we all paid for healthcare, if we all got health insurance, whatever, then it's socially optimal. The group interest is maximized, right? Like the prisoner's dilemma, those guys, if none of them squeal to the cops, everyone is better off. But there are some situations where the individual incentive is actually to do something else. And if individual incentive is not aligned with the group incentive, if there's a difference, we get systematic market failures because people don't care about the group interests, they'll care about their own. And that's things like the tragedy of the commons, where you're going to put way too many sheep on the pasture. It's things like free riding, right? Like you guys pay your taxes and the roads get built, but I can avoid that because I've got a Cayman's Island company, so I do that. And the result of that is that everyone ends up cheating. And fundamentally, no, I mean, it's economic reality, it's market failure, right?
They're wrong, yeah.
And you know, the original economic design for proof of work and proof of stake is that the people that make money pay for everything the network needs. So the original economic design is naive and broken. And we can see this is kind of the explanation. If you're paying for mining, that's what you get. And if you're paying for staking, that's what you get. And the reason these networks pay for these two activities is because if you can't objectively measure who's doing the work, you get a tax on the payment faucet, and they undermine your network. So it's kind of a damned if you do or damned if you don't, right? Because you can be BCH or you can be Dash, and you can say, we're going to take money away from our security mechanism, and we're going to pay for scale, or we're going to pay for decentralization. But then we're defunding consensus, and security goes down. So, and this is like the scalability trilemma that Vitalik talks about, which is if you take any money away from your security function, you're basically lowering security of the network and you're giving it to someone. But I mean, how do you even know that they're doing anything of use? Right? Like Omri with BCH, who are they funding? Nobody knows while they're funding Omri, right? Like, is Omri the best person to pay if you want his version of BCH to be adopted? Maybe not. Probably not, right? Like there's probably some kid in India who, if he started coding BCH apps, would get 2 million transactions a day, and that's the dude you want to fund. So the fundamental problem is economic, and it boils down to people have incentives to do these activities, and they don't have incentives to do these things that provide value generally, because we can't measure that in proof of work and proof of stake. We don't know who's contributing value. And so we have these scaling issues because money is going here. It's going into these mining farms. It's not going into ISPs. It's not going to the peer-to-peer network. So Saito fixes this. And the way it fixes this is we say we can't pay for mining and staking, but there is something we can pay for. And what we pay for is the collection and sharing of money with other nodes in the network. And the challenge, the technical and economic challenge, is doing this in a way that we don't just get circular attacks with people spending their own money to attack the blockchain, right? Because like if we're paying you to collect money, what's stopping you from reaching in your pocket, taking in $1 million and just spinning things in circle, and everyone goes, oh my God, right? So, you know, those are fee recycling attacks. They would exist in proof of work, and they will proof of stake. Like when you can rent stake and when you can rent hash, actually, we're going to get them in Bitcoin. And we're already seeing them in some low security networks, right? Because, and it's even worse there because there's a 51% attack. So like you rent hash, you mint the coin, you sell the coin, you use the profits to rent more hash to attack the network. So the security problem, that's the tricky problem that Saito solves. But the reason we want to use fee collection is we're paying you to collect money and give it to other people. There's a lot of wonderful economic properties that happen. And one of the things that happens is the people in the peer-to-peer network who are providing services to users are suddenly collecting money in proportion to the money that they're bringing into the network. So it's kind of like Bitcoin, they intuit who's doing the work by who shows up with the hash. In Saito, we intuit who does the work by seeing who shows up with the fee, because the mechanism kind of requires you to ultimately, you need to kind of burn money. And if you are collecting fees from users and you're sharing that, you're willing to do it in order to get a tiny percent of that fee. right? Like,
Right.
I'll happily burn money that you're giving to me because I'll get 10% of that. That's great. That's profit for me. But
Right.
if I'm an attacker, well, I've got to spend $1 and I've got to burn 90%.
That doesn't make sense. Right. Right. I
I
see.
go bankrupt really quickly. But to see the importance of the solution, the change in the nature of work, you can see that there's no 51% attack when you've got a network that's secured with this mechanism, because there's nothing you can spend 51 cents on to earn $1.
Right. No, yeah, true.
Yeah, and you
hear
know,
you. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, we can talk about how the consensus mechanism works, but that's the really high level point, which is the importance of the solution is that we have something that's like mining that we can use to secure a blockchain, but all of a sudden we're paying for value. And so like that kid in India who's producing the app, like he builds a social network on Saito, and all of a sudden people start using the computers that he controls to send transactions into the blockchain. And he starts collecting a tiny fee.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So
Okay.
the blockchain survives, but he's making money. Or you're in the peer-to-peer network, right? Because we need to pay for this. If we, you know, this is the Infura problem. It's like one company doing it and they need a business model to support it. Well, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to buy and sell transaction flow. With Saito, actually, the fee that users pay for the network is already paying for those guys. And the only way they can collect it is by giving it out to as many people as possible. So in a way, like you can think of proof of work and proof of stake as mechanisms that get their security, but on the economic layer, they're incentivizing people to, like, if I'm collecting transactions, I'm not going to give them away because, you know, if I'm giving them away, there's that guy and he's not paying his share and he's free riding on it. Or, hey, that guy's collecting and he's giving them away, so I'm not going to waste my time spending money serving users running these full nodes. Like, I'm just going to parasitically leech off of him.
Right.
Those class of economic problems are what go away, and a lot of the security and scaling solutions flow out of that. Like Sybil's, for instance. A lot of people, they're, you know, in proof of stake, it's like, oh, we've got a Sybil resistant system. It's like, and what does that mean? That means you've got a lot of complicated nonsense. In Saito, it is actually Sybil resistance, because what happens is everybody we use cryptography to keep track of who's bringing money into the system. And like hop 1 will make a lot, hop 2 will make half as much, hop 3 will make half as much again. So if you've got a Sybil node in the network, what you've really got is you've got a node that's contributing negative value, right? Like it's cheating some of the other nodes, and the reason it's there is to extract wealth. And if someone, you know, think about like block propagation, transaction propagation, that's what a Sybil is. It's negative value to the network. And it's a problem in proof of work and proof of stake because they have no measure of what value is in the network. With Saito, we do, because we're paying for fee collection. So if someone sets up a Sybil and the transactions are hopping through them, everyone on this side is half as profitable. And the guy on the outside is losing a bit of money too. And so the incentive for the network is economically for hop 3 to send a message to hop 1 and be like, dude,
skip it.
Like, seriously, I'm trying to help you. You send me your transaction flow directly. It's more profitable for me. We're going to get this stuff into blocks much faster. You're going to get paid more. And without this deadweight loser node 2, you're going to make more money too, because the routing path is more efficient. So it's things like that where, you know, the analogy of solving things on the incentive layer, like the solution is not designed to stop sibling. But the result of paying for value is it does, because we can see that that's what a Sybil is.
I see. So then what would you, in that case, because I mean, obviously, as you explained it, it's definitely, I guess it just sounds so complicated because of how you explain it, maybe, or because of, because of how you.
I'm bad at explaining Saito, you know?
That's me. I'm bad at explaining things. No. I think it's because you started off with why you needed it first and then actually explained it. So I guess my question then in this case is because, you know, people who are fans of any of these other cryptos, as you said, you know, yourself, you know, we can actually call it proof of stake, proof of work. I mean, like, what would you call this one in this case? Like, for example, like I like Saito, they use XYZ mechanism.
We used to call it proof of transactions, because we used to call it, now we call it Saito consensus, because people got confused. And calling it anything else also kind of implies it's in the same category of nonsense.
Yeah, I hear you.
Basically what happens is this: as nodes collect fees, they put the transactions in their mempool, and they can look at those transactions and they derive a certain amount of work from them. So if you're the first hop node, you get like 100% of the fee is work. So your work goes up really quickly when you get fees. The second hop node, it goes up half as quickly. And we've got cryptography, so you can't fake it. Like, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you had a connection with the sender. So an attacker can't come in and be like, hey, look, I got all of these fees because it wasn't signed to them, right?
Right.
Like, you can't fake that stuff. And so the deeper it goes in, what basically happens is every hop, it gets more expensive to produce a block. And so you've got to kind of combine income streams if you want to compete at layer 2. And you've got to combine like another 2 layer 2 income streams at level 3. And eventually, though, the network basically keeps a measure of difficulty. And when someone hits it, like in Bitcoin mining, they get to produce a block.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
Of course, there are problems like, why aren't people going to produce blocks at the same time? Read the white paper. And then, like, okay, well, can I spend my own money and then produce a block? Read the white paper.
Right.
To give a high level overview, though, what happens is, okay, we're collecting money to make blocks. What we can't do is we can't give it to the person that's making the block. Because that's kind of like, it's kind of like charging someone $50 to get into your house, and then you leave $100 on the desk.
Right.
So we need to have a cost of attack, and what we make them do is we force them to burn all of the money and all of the fees that they've put into a block. And what we do then is we play the mining game. And so the Bitcoin mining game takes place after the block is produced. And the network will do this. It works slightly differently than Bitcoin. Read the white paper. The end result is we've got a random solution that's difficult and expensive to find, that gives us a random number that we can then use to pick a transaction in the block based on how much money it brought in. Right. So if you routed a really high fee transaction, it's more likely to get picked than a tiny one. But then when we find the transaction, we look inside and we pick one of the routing nodes. And that their chance of getting paid is statistically weighted towards the nodes that are facing the users. And the result of this is that half of the block reward, we're dividing it. So half of it goes on mining, which means that a single lottery ticket costs 50% of the block fees. And half of it goes to the routing nodes. But the routing node that's going to win is statistically biased away from the block producer. And the way the math works out is lovely. The block producer, if you're cheating, if you're an attacker, you're getting your transactions from someone. And what that means is you're punished by about 50%, essentially. And what that means is, if you're spending your own money to attack the network, you need at minimum to have 2 solutions to the mining puzzle to, on average, be picking one that's going to pay you instead of an honest user in the network.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
So it's one of these things where paying for value in a secure lottery means that money is flowing away from the block producer to other people. And the design of the lottery is super simple. It's just a hashing puzzle. But it's an expensive hashing puzzle, which means if you want to cheat this fair system, you've got to spend more money mining than the entire network is earning. And that's how we solve things like, oh, well, are you going to be burning your own money to attack the network? It's like, well, it's like Bitcoin, except that there's no 51% point where this becomes profitable. Like, you actually, if you're attacking the network, it's like, well, you can, if you can get all of that hash power like Bitcoin, but there's no point where it's profitable. You've actually got to burn more than the money that's coming into the network in order to defeat the lottery. So that's kind of the high level solution. We started calling it Saito consensus, because if we started calling it anything else, people are like, it becomes a poor analogy. Like they assume something must be happening, you know?
Okay. No, yeah, I just wanted to make sure because I think that was maybe one thing I noticed when I was doing some research. I'm like, obviously you guys are talking about getting rid of proof of work, proof of stake. So it's like, okay, like what's replacing it? But okay, yeah. I mean, that makes sense though. I like that he didn't go,
or saving them, right? Like one of the things we talk about with Saito is like we're a network that pays for networking, right? So you may want a proof of stake network because maybe you want a parachain, maybe you want NFT assets, and it's just super easy to set that up, right?
Right.
Well, what you can do is you can have a Saito network kind of wrapping around it, and you run the application on the Saito network, and these are the apps in the browser, right? But the app in the browser can use Bitcoin. The app in the browser can use these NFT poker chips on Polkadot, you know? And they can use it because people are using the apps, and it's in the browser because we finally got a way to pay the people that are giving me the data on, on the internet.
I see, and I think that's one of the other things that I guess I wanted to touch on as well. The idea that obviously you guys have the Saito Arcade, right? The current like working implementation of Saito, I guess like a beta, right, of sorts. So because I think that's what I was looking into it. I'm like, so like, is this like obviously Saito's plugged in? I have my wallet already as soon as you go onto the website. But it's like, how can I use Bitcoin and Ethereum on it? I mean, you can almost kind of, I mean, you can use it because technically Ethereum is just a one Web3 wallet injection away from being able to use an app with the browser as well, right? Yeah. So technically, I
mean, what's MetaMask? MetaMask is you install something in your browser that connects to this company Infura, and then they do all of the blockchain stuff for you, right? People don't know this. We've been shocked how people don't know. They think they're like, oh, I've got MetaMask, I'm using Ethereum. And it's like, no, dude, you're using Joe Lubin's company, and they're processing. Last we heard, like 80 to 90% of the transactions for Ethereum. That's not decentralized. That's like Google. That's Google's ad share, you know?
No, that's crazy. That's crazy.
That was Stanford Blockchain Conference, I think 2019. It was pre-COVID. We didn't make it COVID. That was the hot gossip. The Ethereum devs were like, oh my God, because consensus has exploded. No one else wants to do it. Right. And what like to criticize Ethereum, like the Bitcoin model is the peer-to-peer network is around volunteers. And so they say, well, we can't scale because as soon as volunteers stop doing that, the private sector steps in and we're screwed because monopolization, cartelization, people are controlling fee flows. Ethereum's solution really is to say, well, Joe Lubin will still volunteer to do it because he's making so much money from Ethereum skyrocketing that, like, well, why not? You know,
good old capitalism, right? I mean, Joe Lubin.
Sure. I mean, in the short term, we're interested in long term.
If you don't mind me asking, actually, kind of on that, right? How would you say, and this is kind of touching on what we said earlier, how do you think human psychology, how we think as people, factor into centralization and these services and infrastructure? Like specifically in this case, Infura. Like why do you think people are using Infura rather than diversifying into other, maybe different node providers in this case?
I mean, do you think people care? Like, honestly, I'd say 99% of people, who cares? Like people want number go up. And that's totally legitimate, right? Like we're screwed by the banking sector. We're screwed by the tech sector. And, no matter what happens, even if we're concerned about centralization, we're concerned about Infura, like, well, man, it's better than RBC.
Right.
The Citibank. So,
So we picked the lesser evil, but it's still not good. I guess type of thing.
I've got an answer to your psychological question. I'm saying, like, I'm a maximalist about openness in Saito, but I don't think it's sensible for us to be telling people, oh no, why do you care about Ethereum? Why are you using that? Because on a practical level, one, it is better than some forms of closed commercial systems, and that's fine. And two, it's pretty cool and it's new and it's exciting, and the people that use this will be using the systems that work in the future. So, that's fine. I would say psychologically, one of the big things that keeps people from seeing the problem is we've got a bunch of devs running around telling people, trust us. We're the ones that know how to optimize these problems away.
Right.
And they say, oh, the problem is technical. And people go, oh, well, it's a technical problem. Like, bring in the geek squad to solve this problem.
Yeah, we have no idea what's going on.
It's not something I need to worry about, right?
Right.
And like, okay, that's legit, but is this actually true? And one of the Saito critiques when we start talking about economics and collective action problems and public choice theory, is recognizing we're actually dealing with incentive issues. And people have trouble seeing that, right? Like, they look at a server and they say, look, this server is part of the network. So like, our challenge is getting someone to pay for the network. Well, Infura is paying for the network. Problem solved. It's like, well, no, your problem was never getting someone to pay for the network. Your problem is getting non-excludable and open access to data flows. So you have a non-excludable, censorship-free, open and trustless network. And that's not the same thing. Right. But asking you, like, people by conceptualizing it as a tech problem, it helps, people are like, oh, but Infura is paying for the server, problem solved. And like, things need to get really bad before we're even able to point at Infura and be like, yeah, but that's like Gmail. Like,
right. I mean,
psychological. It's like, what level are people looking at? People very rarely look at the economic level, and honestly, like, the proof of stake people, because they're breaking stuff. Like, what's the scalability trilemma? That's garbage. But what that is it's useful, and it's useful because if you believe that you can only fund these other two things by defunding security, then that's an excuse to defund security to do anything like this that's valuable. It doesn't actually apply in Saito, because in Saito, we get security from decentralization. So there's like a two-way trade-off, but there's not a three-way trade-off. So like, you can increase decentralization security at the same time, because if you start adding routing nodes, you're dividing the money up further from the block producer, and that increases cost of attack in many situations. I think I'm kind of going on.
No, definitely. I mean, again, like, I always like to hear kind of like the thoughts on, especially stuff like this, because I think that's really important, especially people talking about decentralization, centralization with the blockchain. I think everyone automatically assumes everything's 100% decentralized, which isn't the truth.
Well, it's actually, I'd push you on that, and I'd say the problem is that's an example, because people say, oh, decentralization. You say, well, what do you mean?
Exactly.
And then they're like, well, no, like, I can define it. In Saito, we can define it. We're maximalists. We say what matters is, like, let's go back to Bitcoin.
Sure.
And all of these tech people, they're like, oh, there's nothing new about Bitcoin. And it's like, nonsense. There was one thing that was new about Bitcoin. What was new about Bitcoin? It wasn't the tech. It was the network paid for itself and was theoretically supposed to survive in the absence of an owner. Right? Like, if people dropped out mining, like, mining profits go up and new guys come in. It's like, well, why is that important? That's important because now the network is trustless. And again, we've got these POS people spinning nonsense where they're like, it's trustless because of cryptography. And it's like, nonsense. We've had cryptography. We've had like public key infrastructure stuff since the 1970s. We've had commercial PKI systems since the 1990s. The Apple App Store is a PKI system, right? Like, cryptography is not new. Bitcoin, though, is Apple doesn't need to pay for it. So there's no one you can go to shut it down. So it's the openness of the ability to participate with the incentives that make it self-sustainable that is why it's trustless. And it's like, that's why it can be money. Because if it's Amazon coin, we're like, well, that's not money, because, I mean, maybe it's money for Amazon, but it's going to get regulated.
Right, of course.
POS people forget that. And a lot of their solutions are adding owners and adding privatization to the network in order to scale it. And it's like, well, that's just useless. And from a Saito perspective, it's useless. If your number kind of go up guy, you can be like, well, maybe this will fly because maybe it's going to get a lot of usage and maybe the value of the token goes up. But like,
that's it. Yeah, it's not really. Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, it's fine. It's totally legitimate for people, because the crypto space, there's our critique is of something fundamental, because we think fundamentally at the end of the day, we're not interested in people sacrificing the property of openness, because we think it's the only thing that's new about Bitcoin. So it's the thing we have to protect. And it's also the thing that if you don't protect it and it goes away, you're in shitcoin space where there's 120,000 competitors. And like, why are people using you? Like,
Yeah.
Like if it's a permission network, why am I paying a fee to use mine? Why am I paying miners and stakers anyway? Like, there's a licensed permission network that doesn't pay miners and stakers, and it's like a third the price. So why do I want permission to Ethereum if there's an actual open, if there's a licensed version that doesn't have those costs? Decentralization, I'll just finish it. Decentralization, you push the tech people on it and they come up with all of this stuff. What they're really looking at, if you pay attention, is they're talking about openness. They want open data flows, they want the open ability to participate, and they want non-excludability. But non-excludability is an economic property. Exactly. And that's why there's this mess, because they're like decentralization, which is a tech structure. They're thinking that this text structure has economic properties, and it doesn't. Because like, we can have a distributed and decentralized system that's owned by one guy.
Right, exactly.
But they've got this ontological mindset, like we talked
about. I think it's kind of like you were saying earlier. I think a lot of people have tunnel vision. I think, and to me, it all kind of comes back down to how people think. I think a lot of people, when they get into conversations or maybe discussions with people, they automatically assume that they're correct. They won't budge on whatever they're doing. That's it. I think that's one of the biggest issues, just in general, that people aren't willing to say, you know what, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe what this guy's saying isn't actually, complete horseshit. But
token price makes it harder, because like, you're criticizing, like, if you admit that your bags have holes in them, like,
it's over. So let me ask you this. I know we were kind of touching on the Saito Arcade for a little bit. Maybe we can kind of tackle this, maybe two questions kind of same time. Obviously, Saito Arcade currently runs a couple of games, right? You have the pandemic game, I think it was chess, and a couple other ones, right?
Poker's the one everyone likes. That's the dirty secret of the Saito Arcade. like 90% poker and 10% board games,
Oh, okay, because I'll be honest, I was playing the chess game and I was doing pretty good at that one.
I retweeted, I think it was you, I think I retweeted your screenshot, because I know who you were playing, because I saw his username and I'm like, dude,
oh really?
What the hell? What's with laggard stuff,
So
now wearing it as a badge, so
yeah. So obviously, if we're able to make it work for the board games, for poker in this case, is there, and this is probably a far reach, is there any way that we'll be able to see this type of standard, this gaming standard for, like, let's say, like almost like shooting games? Let's say, let's throw Call of Duty into the mix. Obviously, way far down the line, but do you think it's possible?
Those are tough. I mean, there's features of games that blockchain helps with, and there are features of games that it doesn't help with, right?
Of course.
With board games and stuff and card games, the things that blockchain helps with, it helps with a lot. Like, if you want to play a game of poker, it can be provably fair. If you want to play a shoot 'em up game that, like, did I headshot you or did I miss? You kind of need a central server to figure that stuff out.
I hear you. Yeah.
Doing that in like real time on a blockchain, I'm not sure how you do it. Like, but you've got points of integration, right? Like, you could have a central server that's like a CS server or something like that, and then that server integrates with the crypto stuff so that you can make deposits and you can make withdrawals and you can interact with it and you can use third-party payment channels. So there's a lot of stuff you can do.
Right.
But what exactly you're using the blockchain for in each case, well, that's the question. It's like, well, what are you using the blockchain for? I think with the arcade, one of the reasons it's there is not, people see it and they're like, oh, Saito, you're a gaming project. And it's like, well, we're a scalable layer one blockchain, right? Like
Right.
one of the points is you can run applications without smart contracts just by using the private and public keys that you have. So things like shuffling a deck in poker, that's because I've got keys, you've got keys, and we can use the blockchain to bootstrap this totally secure process.
Right.
We can do things like it's a secure Diffie Hellman key exchange. You do that with two people. So, the game stuff, it can go over the blockchain in early days. When the blockchain gets congested, we just do I give you my IP address, you give me yours. We do a secure exchange of keys. And now we can take the data intensive stuff and move it off chain. So, where's the first person shooter? Well, it can be anywhere. I think the really interesting thing is to push past the arcade and say, well, it doesn't just need to be the two of us exchanging keys. There are techniques that you can do key exchange with like 10 people, or 20 people. And at this point, we should be asking questions like, if we can do this, do we really want to be using services like Telegram or Zoom or Signal or Facebook? Because, well, I mean, we've now got secure group chat with 10 people or 20 people. It gets expensive if you're going up to 500, But there are approaches where all of a sudden, like and this is the Web3 thing, it's like it's decentralized. Facebook as a company doesn't necessarily survive 30 years out. It might, but a lot of what we think of as identities and data that's stored in a corporate database becomes data that's just kind of spontaneously shared between peers, and we all kind of have a different database of what our friends' posts are, So like at massive scale, we may just use the blockchain when our IP address changes and we publish an update, and it's kind of like a heartbeat where, oh, Joe fell offline. Oh, and he's back online and he's now this address. That sort of thing. So, arcade, yeah, but it's bigger than that.
No, I definitely hear that. And in that case, because we're on the same topic, for the most part, I mean, the biggest thing about blockchain is the ability to send transactions and receive transactions securely, right? That's one of the things. So Saito, in this case, we're able to do all these things in terms of the arcade. Does Saito use
universal broadcast as a feature? People talk about tokens because that's I'm in this technical money mindset. A lot of the functionality is I can be anywhere on the network and get access to data. So let's say you want to, like, here's a great use case people don't think about. I want to have a server that is able to monitor the blockchain and interact with it, but I don't want people hacking that server. And I know that as soon as someone finds out where it is, like, I'm going to get DOSed by 4chan. Well, no, seriously, right? Like, how do you protect a server? Who are you protecting it from? Well, one way is you have that server listening on a public network, and you can actually hide its location because the network is this universal broadcast system. So, people can know that it's on the network somewhere, but they don't necessarily know where it is. So a lot of like, I'm broadcasting my IP address so my friends can listen to it and they can find me. Like, that's not a token transfer function. That's a universal broadcast function. Like Lightning Network, layer 2 payments, you can bootstrap those off of universal broadcast. It's one of the reasons it's why, like, when people think of layer 2, they're like, oh, layer 2 is the same as layer 1. It's like, no, you've sacrificed desirable properties of a scalable layer 1 network, which include the ability to send a message and anybody can get it, non-excludable access to data.
I see. Okay.
DAGs lose that property because it's like you could attach data to transactions, but it's not like everyone's going to get that.
I see. So then, because I guess not really because of that, but I mean, just in general, then does Saito? Could you say Saito uses something similar to smart contracts like Ethereum, or
you could do that layer 2? Our criticism of Ethereum is, Vitalik's a smart guy. He looks at blockchain. He says it's ordering data, it's structuring it in order. So why don't we put data in transactions and use that data as an input to an EVM?
Mhm.
The problem with Ethereum structurally is it's really hard to scale that if it's on the backbone network and all of the computers are doing all of the work.
Yeah, it's
So
a lot
the
of
way
transactions.
you,
It's a lot of transactions, a lot of congestion, right?
I mean, it's like every computer on the network that's sending data around has to execute all of these token transfers. It's like, why do you want that?
Right.
It's also things like you've now got this massive bloated state. So when you reorganize the blockchain, like you remove 3 blocks and then you add another new 3 blocks, it's super, super slow because you now need all of these really big databases and these really big data archives. And you've got to like remove 3 and we're going back to this state. And we've got to keep like 100 of them because God knows how deep we're going to get reorged. And then we need to re-execute and the blockchain gets slow. It's super hard to scale. With Saito, one of the beautiful things is because we're a UTXO system, the data that's attached to transactions, nobody really needs to care about them if they're just a node in the network. It's just like random binary data. Like we're not executing it. What you can do though, is you could have like 5 computers or 10 or 20 or an unknown number say transactions that are sent to this address, we're going to treat those as instructions to L2 EVM. So you could do smart contracts on layer 2. And there are a couple of different ways of doing it depending on what properties you want. And so, the Saito critique is, well, what does that give us? Well, that means, the layer 2 people, they can worry about their state. But the stuff that the blockchain is supposed to provide, we're not slowing down because not everything needs to be an application.
I see what you're saying, right? So the main point, I guess the main layer of Saito is just handling the core, just transfers back and forth, and everything else. But the layer 2 is handling anything complicated. I see.
Right,
Okay,
like the Saito Arcade, the arcade games are layer 2 applications, right? Like we're playing chess. I send you a message, and that message has data inside it. And in chess, it's got my move. And so if we're playing, like if we're gambling with BTC on chess or something, you can cryptographically prove that I've made my move, right? Like we're not going to have this, I've taken my finger off the pawn, right. Like, and, if you've got a game that has, if it's hard to look at the board and figure out who's winning, you can have things like escrowed players who will look at the board state and say, okay, we're going to give it to white. Okay, we're going to give it to black. Because the problems you run into are like, what if I rage quit after the river because my poker hand has gone from spectacular to really bad, but like I'm all in at this point. And the computer's not able to solve that because the game has suddenly just stopped. So, these kind of use cases is why you would want universal broadcasting, the cryptography and stuff. But like that chess game it's a layer 2 app. I send you transactions, you're listening on an address, yours. And when you receive that transaction, your wallet goes, well, what is this? Oh, it's chess. And it sends it up to the chess. And so I could send a message onto the network, universal broadcast. And it can say, I'm running for this kind of EVM. And anyone who's running that EVM will get that transaction and they'll pass it to their EVM and they can update things. You could even, and some of this stuff, if you want to, you could even do it as a level 2 blockchain on a level 1 blockchain. Like you could have people mining and staking to produce EVM blocks if you wanted to. It's kind of screwed up mentally thinking about this stuff, but you could do it. And there are reasons you might want to. But you don't have the lower network doesn't need to worry about that, right? Like the ISPs, the routing nodes aren't slowing down.
Right, yeah. It's not needed. I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's like the big data structure is the UTXO hash map that tracks what UTXO slips can still be spent and which ones have been spent. And so what we do with Saito is we keep those in a super, super scalable data structure called a Google Dense hash map. And when the chain is being added to or reorganized, you're literally just going to this in-memory data structure and flipping bits really quickly. Like spent, not spent, spent, not spent. And you can do that insanely quickly. And that's what you want on the base level. Put the applications on the upper level where not everyone needs to worry about
using them. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like if you want to, you can. You know, the question is, what do you want? And maybe what you want is you want a licensed, maybe your smart contract, you want Google, Amazon, and Tencent, all three of them executing your smart contracts, and you don't need the Ethereum style thing, but you want it on Saito because you want the cryptographic guarantees of fairness. So,
so then kind of on that as well. I mean, I guess maybe kind of actually maybe a little bit off that. In terms of the token, obviously it's everyone's favorite thing. What can let's go up, right? What can, if anything, you could say regular people do with the Saito token? I guess assuming the mainnet comes out, like when the mainnet comes out.
When the mainnet comes, assuming when the mainnet comes out.
When I said when, I didn't say when. I didn't say when.
Yeah, I mean, we actually do have the network. What we don't have on the main network yet is token persistence. And when that happens, it's the equivalent of mainnet, because if you have your tokens on mainnet at that point, they're not going to go away. That's about 6 months out. We want to get the Rust client out first. Cool. What can you do with the token? Well, you can actually stake in that system. And you can use the token to pay for use of the network because it's a utility network. One thing I would push people on is, I think a lot of people in the POS space, what they're doing is they've forgotten why you have a token in a blockchain. And they're playing a financial game. And they've kind of decided, well, the networks are secure because we're paying for stakers.
Right.
And it's like, well, yeah, but you've introduced all of these economic problems and you're becoming a permission network. So why am I paying stakers anyway? But we'll forget that. They've decided that they can pay stakers with tokens. This is what a blockchain is. It's an excuse to pay stakers. It's like, it's not going to work, but whatever. Given the fact that we have this wonderful machine that is paying stakers, let's start creating complicated and inventive financial games that are basically kind of trust up. I don't want to say a Ponzi scheme, but like kind of like buy-in, with vesting games. And personally, I don't think long-term that stuff has a lot of competitive advantage, because it's like Uniswap, PancakeSwap, all of this stuff in the long run, it's just going to be a commodity. And the rates of return on holding a commoditized structure is like 2.5% or something. So I think we're playing brand games with this stuff right now. And I think that when people ask that question, it's a legitimate question for people who are doing short-term token Ponzi stuff, or, they're looking for pumps. That's totally legit. It's not the game we're playing. What I would encourage people who are interested in Saito and the token is to realize that we're very deliberate about following what the Bitcoin model is. And that Bitcoin model is, the reason we have the token now is, one, we need to get distribution of the token because of the way Saito works. We can't have a block reward. You remember the example of the house and the desk? Like, if we have a block reward, it's like, congratulations, you burned money to produce a block. Have this suitcase of money. So yeah, it's a distribution problem. So we're solving it now with having a token that it also helps us determine how people are pricing the network. But one, it gets distribution, and two, it also encourages people to understand how Saito works, because that's very important for us. And we're kind of a litmus test for people that kind of understand economics on the blockchain level. And so it's good for us if the people that understand what we're doing are not facing sort of like Bitcoin, Ethereum levels of, am I FOMOing into something that's like super expensive? Right.
No, definitely.
It's the same reason, like, I look on Telegram and people are like, when are you listing on OKX? When are you listing on this? And it's like, well, look, I mean, we're actually talking with them, and anyone can look at the people that are backing Saito and they can figure out without too much effort what's happening. But like, we're prioritizing developing the network. We're not prioritizing organizing like a 2-week pump and dump that's zero sum for you guys. So
no, you know what? And I think that's the best way to go about it. What do they say? Always under promise and over deliver, right? I think that's the best way to always go, especially because people will always be let down no matter what. You know what I mean?
The obligation is you don't want to put people in a situation where they're going to get ripped off in a zero-sum game.
Right. No,
like,
yeah.
And that's 90% of pump and dump token scams. It's like, and that's what people want, because people want to be on the scam side of that, right? Like, let me buy in the first 5 to 10 minutes so I can participate in the dump. And it's like, well, okay, congratulations, but you're dumping on someone, you know?
I tell you.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You know, I mean, people get complicit in it, you know, like we can see from the inside of it, because you get pushed in that direction if you're a project, because people are like, we can help you out by doing this. And you actually do need to provide pushback on that.
Yeah.
But
no, yeah. And
I mean, you know what it's like.
Oh, no, exactly. And that's why, for the most part, I tend to, I mean, like, people are always talking to me about like random, like, you know, not scams, but maybe like, you know, shit coins, meme coins and stuff like that. I'm like, you know what? If you want to throw your money at it, go for it. But I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna contribute to the whole process of money flow in that. It's not productive, in my opinion. You know,
and it's the question of how the individual engages with it, right? Like, it's gonna happen. You know.
Yeah, no,
you know, and like, we can see it because, like, there are reasons that we have a token, and there are reasons that we're not, like, arranging zero-sum pump and dumps with it. You know, that being said, if people do want to talk about tokens, I'd say look at Bitcoin. You know, we are a fundamental solution, and we are aiming very, very big. And I think people don't often see that at first, because they're like, oh, it's board games or poker and stuff, or oh, it's you know, because it's got to be accessible. You know, if you start people out and you say, look, there are fundamental economic problems, and we're losing trustlessness, and we're losing openness. People are like, but decentralization, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, so it's easier to be like, you know, apps in the browser, or let's shuffle a deck of cards. And that's totally legit, because if you can't deliver value through applications, what's the point of having an application blockchain anyway, you know?
No, exactly. And you know, it's the idea that, I mean, even now as it is, I think, I mean, as you said, I mean, as you kind of alluded to, I think like a good amount of people, when they see Saito, they think, oh, it's an arcade, it's a blockchain for arcades, or, you know, it's just solving the Infura problem. It's like, no, it seems like it's really just kind of cutting deep and solving like the consensus problems that proof of work and proof of stake has, and then you're kind of delivering that to people in different ways, right? You know what I mean?
And like, it's a communication challenge, because how do you get people to think about this? And
it's crazy.
Hard. Like, we've talked to proof of stake developers, and they'll say, oh, the 51% attack is impossible to solve. It's impossible to solve. And we'll say, well, you can solve it this way. And they go, why would you ever want to solve the 51% attack? Like, I'm not making
Really?
this up. No, seriously, right? Or you'll get things like with proof of stake, where they'll go, oh, but we've solved that with finality. I don't know if you like, it's the idea is that you have a closed set of validators, and they conspire, and they basically use Lamport style signatures to validate. And then if they cheat, you can slash them. And it's like, well, okay, well, you don't have a 51% attack here. You've moved it here. You know, moving it to another part of your network is not solving it. It's like you've got that, you know, it's like you've got the little bubble under your phone screen, and you push it away from the start button, you know?
Right.
And, you know, but that's what they're doing. They're moving, and they're shuffling the problems around. And that's where, like, the inception analogy is really helpful, because it's like, look, unless you solve the incentive problems, the reason stuff gets pushed around is because all you're doing is you're changing where these incentive problems manifest, right? Like, you're not letting people attack block production. So all of a sudden they're gaming the staking mechanism and who actually gets to participate. But yeah, it's a huge problem communicating with people. A lot of devs, by virtue also, like the scalability trilemma comment we had, they're in a mindset where it's like, well, their job is to be the person that makes trade-offs. And if you go to them and you say, well, actually, what your job should be is to fix the informational and incentive problems so that the market can optimize it by itself. They don't know what you're talking about. They don't know. They don't have a background in economics. They can't recognize the market failure. So we've talked to people about the block size wars, like the block size hard cap, right?
Right.
And they're like, I just don't understand how there's a market failure. And it's like, well, you're imposing a limit on the amount of stuff that of data that block producers can put in a block.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, that's data management. What that means is you don't trust people to do the right thing if they follow their incentives. And they've never thought about it this way. Right? Or they talk about governance and they're like, we've got this governance system. And it's like, well, from the Saito perspective, as soon as you hear governance, you should hear broken. Because no, like seriously. It sounds like a rant, and maybe it's a rant, but it's true.
Go ahead.
Governance is a trusted third party. And the entire point of a blockchain is you don't have a trusted third party. You don't have closure. And if you have to have a governance mechanism, well, what is that? That's controlling and restricting the freedom of action of participants in your system. You don't do that if the incentives in the system are correct. And the entire point of Bitcoin is that the incentives are supposed to give you the proper outcome. So if you're adding governance, if you're adding these hard-coded restrictions on things, you're moving away from a market system and you're moving towards a permissioned closed network, or you've got cartels of participants that are policing each other. And the problem with this is often what you do when you create these systems is you make it really easy for incumbents to attack the network. Because we're like, well, we're protecting the network from these outside evil attackers by making it easy for the people that are already in the system to wield undue influence by like, they can collude to keep them from actually staking and entering the system and stuff. But yeah, it's super tough to talk to people about these problems. And I think the psychological issues you mentioned, coupled with the fact that people have normalized these as tech issues, is a big issue.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny as you keep on kind of explaining the different parts of Saito, I can't help but notice. I mean, you said a couple times. I think I saw on the website actually just earlier. You guys changed it from like mentioning Infura to the incentive layer, right? And I'm starting to see that.
We're playing around with it, right?
No, but it makes sense though, because you're almost taking what traditional kind of blockchain is. That we're calling blockchain traditional, traditional blockchain where it's just mainly kind of just tech focused and really kind of focused on, I mean, obviously the code, but focused on like the different tech sides of it. When really, if it's all about people interacting with each other, maybe you should focus more on the incentives that people have to make sure that network is upheld, rather than focusing on the tech that's doing it. You know what I mean?
Right. It goes back to Bitcoin. What's Bitcoin? It's trustless. It's self-sufficient. So the incentives have to be correct, because like, of course we can have a government. Of course we can have like an industry coalition running a permission chain. Like that's a trusted third party. That's a known solution. Yeah. Bitcoin is supposed to be a solution that exists without this. It's supposed to be open. So yeah, like people forget that. We talk in the Inception video. There's this lovely concept. It's called anamnesis. It's a Greek idea, and the idea is that when the soul is born, it forgets the truth of the world that it knew. And you can see this in Inception because like characters fall into the dream world and they forget things that they used to know, and then like Saito comes along and he remembers, and in the act of remembering is this kind of cathartic return to paradise. One of the things Saito is reminding people in the space is that like blockchain's not this tech thing, it's this economic thing. And all of these proof of stake networks, like it's totally crazy. The Cornell guys, they blow my mind. Like have you even heard of Bloxroute?
No, I've not.
They've got a scaling solution. It's brilliant. Their scaling solution of scaling the network is letting a company own it. I wish I was making this up. It's totally insane. They're like, no, guys, trust us. We're going to run an efficient network as a company. And it's like, well, can I join you? Can I run a server and make money myself? It's like, no, you can't do that. No. But you can buy our token. And it's like, okay, congratulations. You reinvented stock and you've privatized the peer-to-peer network. Like, it's total garbage. But like proof of stake. And in the developer mindset, like, people don't blink twice about adding closure. And it's getting worse and worse because they're like, oh, closed sets of validators. And when you add closure, you do make it easier to scale because, okay, well, we've got 300 participants that need to be in touch. And we know who's producing blocks, so we can round robin, right? Like if you're an open system and you don't know where the block is coming from, because anyone can do it, that's a harder problem. We think Saito is the best stab at that for a couple of reasons, but like people have forgotten what it is that they're supposed to be building. And it's kind of like they see a blockchain and they're like, oh, Satoshi invented tokens. And the solution he solved was get rich quick. So we're going to build these complicated machines that are optimizing for get rich quick. And in order to do that, we have to sacrifice the actual difficult problems. And we're going back to this crap that we know works if we're using permission systems.
It's crazy. So I mean, I guess to kind of wrap up a little bit, what do you guys have planned for the future of Saito? I know you mentioned that mainnet's coming in around 6 months. I mean, is there anything else specifically that you guys ever planned or?
I mean, tons of stuff are happening. The next big release should be the Web3 support, which is milestone 1 in our web grant. That's basically, we love the Polkadot guys because they're more open-minded. Like the Ethereum guys, it's really hard to talk to them in part because they've got these blinders on. The Dot guys are like, you can talk to them about Infura and they're like, yeah, you know, that's not good. Also because they're looking and they're like, well, we don't have Joe Lubin. So, and nobody, like people are coding all of this software, but nobody wants to pay the money to run it. So, you know, the Web3 stuff is coming out. That's going to be supporting the ability for Polkadot kind of parachains and stuff to interact with the arcade. A lot of the parachain stuff is being delayed, so it's not going to be, there's not going to be a ton you can do at the start, but people will be able to see where it's going. And we're going to be adding things like hopefully making Ethereum payments and Bitcoin and other cryptos will hopefully come into the arcade too. So that's happening. There is stuff happening on the token side and the marketing side in that. And we've got the Rust client going, new applications underway. So it's both a fast and a slow march, you know?
Hey, yeah, no, but it's a march nonetheless. That is very true. Right?
Hopefully it's not the long march from China. But,
So I guess the last question I have for you then, I guess a little bit off of Saito, is what personally brings you happiness? What do you find joy in doing? This is a little bit random, but I like to ask this question.
Progress towards goals. And the challenge is that goals, you can't control what your goals are because I think they come from something fundamental within you. And I think people get depressed in situations partly where they can't make progress, which is like the midlife crisis thing, where like Joseph Campbell said, he's like, you know, you're halfway up a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. But I think the deeper problem for a lot of people is they get trapped in situations where like they don't even know what their values make it hard for them to even figure out what they should be aiming for and what their goals should be. We're really lucky because we're maximalists, right? So we're able, like, I care about openness. I know Richard does, like, you know, it's abstract for people, but for us, it's not so abstract because we look at and, you know, we have meetings and phone calls where we're like, what the hell are they thinking? You know, like, how can they think that this is a good thing to do? But
I love that. Yeah, I find that's a very important question to ask. I think it boils down to like a belief in something, and obviously, it seems like your belief is really just openness, just in general. You know,
I mean, Saito is important for us, and I mean, I think for us also, we can see that something was lost in 2017. There was an influx, like the ICO boom. It's an influx of people. A lot of the original reasons that people cared about blockchain kind of disappeared in the money grab. A lot of the people that got involved are involved not for the right reasons, and you know, there are good things that come from it too. But you know, Richard and we've spent a lot of time in China, and we believe that blockchain is important for reasons that are a lot more than number goes up. And I think there are people that get crypto on that level, and and they do care about that.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, by the way, I mean, I would love to visit China. China sounds amazing.
Parts of it, and
Parts of it, right?
it's. I think everyone who spends time in China, they develop a love-hate relationship with it.
It's like anywhere. Come on. It's not like New York. Same thing.
Okay. Particularly strong love-hate relationship, but
all right.
yeah. Well, I mean, New York sounds nice, except for the pandemic stuff you guys are dealing with, I guess.
Yeah, it's just that, let me see. There's probably a bunch of other things too, but it's okay. I don't want to shit on New York just yet.
Well, I got to say, Thailand is really nice. So China versus Thailand, there's less air pollution. The food is maybe not as good, but people are happy here, so.
Ooh, Thailand sounding good then. I mean, I am a big fan of food though. That's why I went to Albania last year. I loved Albania for the food, and then the viewing. But yeah, Thailand.
I've never even heard of Albanian food.
It's so good. It's like Greek and Italian food pretty much. They're like right in the middle. It's a beautiful mix. But I guess we can cut it off there. Obviously, David, I appreciate you for allowing this to take place. Obviously,
So, I mean, honestly, it's the opposite. Thank you for giving us a space to have this conversation.
No, I mean, to me, it's all about, again, just getting people's opinions and thoughts out there. I think Saito's doing something really, really interesting and different, and that's why I'm so happy to be just like talking to you, and even like doing that review the other day was so interesting to me, just learning something new.
I think people will be very, very pleased by where we're going. It's going to be a fun ride.
That's awesome. Well, David,
yeah,
we're going to cut it off here. Of course. All right, guys, just to end it off, I do want to go ahead and thank, again, David and the Saito team. Again, I really appreciate David taking the time out of his day. It was night where he was at, so obviously he could have been sleeping, but instead he was talking to me. And of course, the Saito team for building such an interesting and cool project. Again, to me, like this entire experience so far, learning about Saito has been very thought-provoking, I would say, in terms of, again, just kind of making me rethink and just kind of look at blockchain as a whole, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the ones that currently exist, and kind of see where Saito's coming from with their works. This is why I love doing what I do in terms of making videos for y'all, because to me, it gives me the opportunity to learn about things I would have never learned about in the beginning anyways. So obviously, to me, like that's one of the most important things in my book. Everything else comes secondary. So the fact that David was able to take some of his time out of his day, again, to speak with me was beautiful. Obviously, if you guys think there's anything I could have done better in terms of interviewing, please let me know down in the comments. In terms of what he was talking about, listen, a good amount of the stuff that he was saying, I understood and all that stuff. Another good amount was like, oh shit, like a little bit over the head. But that's why I like having these conversations, man, because it definitely opens my mind to really, see how people that are, I guess you could say, people that are smarter in this space think, right? To me, that's like, you never want to be the smartest person in the room. And in this case, obviously, I appreciated it. So if you guys do want to go ahead and follow David, I'll put his Twitter up here as well. And of course, the Saito team, you can go ahead and follow them on Twitter. I think they're actually hiring some people, so who knows? Maybe one of y'all are looking for a job. Anyways, I'm gonna cut it off here. I thank you guys for watching, especially if you watched through the entire thing. And again, if you guys have any questions or comments, or even for David, or on how I handled the interview or anything like that, let me know. I'm all ears, and I appreciate you guys for watching. Again, I really do. I'll see you on the next one. All right, peace.